Hey, I'm Jeff Sinisak, and I'm going to present here a Let's Play of the game Caverns of Xaskazien II. I've been working on this game for about 3 years now. It's a sequel to a 1995 game I made called Caverns of Xaskazien. And by sequel, I really just mean an elaborate remake with a lot of added bells and whistles. It's not available to the public yet. It needs a lot more work, and really needs to be made street legal, I guess, before I can put it out there. But there are a lot of people who are playtesting the alpha version, and there are a lot of people who have voiced curiosity about what it is that's Caverns 2 is going to be. So for those people, and for the playtesters who don't want to try to absorb a lengthy manual, I thought I'd make these videos and sort of walk them through how the game is played and keep things as clear as possible. So right off the bat here on the title screen, you'll see this flying sword. That's your mouse cursor. And you've really only got 4 options right here, most of which are self-explanatory. Click on Quit and you'll be dumped back to the Windows desktop. Click on View High Scores and you get a list of all your previous characters where you can see their score and how well they fared, or in this case, how poorly they fared. Load Game would load up your previously saved game. You can only have one saved game at a time. And finally, we have Enter Caverns, which is where you would go to make a brand new character and start a new adventure. And we're going to head there and do that in just a moment. Before we do, though, I wanted to give a bit of a lowdown as to what Caverns of Xaskazien is really all about. The object of the game is you're controlling a single adventurer who has to descend into this big warren of caves and mazes to defeat this evil demon named Xaskazien. The problem is he starts out way down under the earth on dungeon level 30, you start up way on dungeon level 1, and there's a lot of monsters and traps and all kinds of craziness standing between you and your objective. So it's very difficult to actually reach him and kill him. I am a huge fan of more traditional linear role-playing games. You know, I grew up on Ultima, absolutely love the Bethesda games, Oblivion, Skyrim, that sort of thing, I love them. But they are a very, very different beast from Caverns, which is a traditional roguelike. And I wanted to explain a bit about that. In something like Oblivion or Skyrim, you create a character, and you live with that character for 100 hours, 120 hours, whatever it is, the length of time it takes you to play the game. You're that same character going through that same world. Very emotionally investing, to be sure, and I absolutely adore those games. But there are some drawbacks. The principal one to me is the fact that in order to actually allow you to experience those games, the games kind of have to cheat. In that I mean, if you die, you just kind of pop back to life. Maybe in some games you'd reload an earlier save. In a game like Dark Souls, for instance, there'd be a penalty, to be sure, you'd lose some stuff, but you still spring back to life. And to me that takes out some of the terror that your character should be feeling in dealing with a death trap like this demon's cave. In Caverns of Xaskazien, if you die, you're dead. That's it. There's no reloading a saved game because your old saved game gets erased. So there are definite consequences to death, and that's, I think, what adds a lot of tension to the game. The other key difference, though, you know, it would be very frustrating if you were playing Oblivion and you got 80 hours in, and you died and you had to start over, for obvious reasons, and that's that, as magnificent as a game like Oblivion is, it's the same game over and over. If you play it again, all the characters are back where they started. You know, maybe you're playing a different character type, but it's really the same game. Caverns of Xaskazien and other roguelikes generate a brand new adventure for you every time. You'll never get the same game. If you play it 10,000 times, it won't be the same game. So it's really a game that's meant to be played over and over. And if you take a look at the high scores here from my own personal playthroughs, the last 18 games that I've done, if you take a look down here, you'll see that every single one of these poor buggers met with a really bad, horrible demise. I made the game and I only survived maybe 1% of the time. So you're not just playing to try to win. You're also playing to try to generate as high a score as possible and see if you can do better than you've done in the past. And if you can win, awesome. Alright, let's hop in and make a brand new character. Here we are at the character creation screen, and the first thing I want to show you, if you'll keep your eye on this section of the screen, you'll see that any single thing I point at here, doesn't matter what it is, a bunch of text pops up right there. So what that is an explanation of what it is that I'm pointing at. If I point at the character creation word, it tells you what you're here to do. So the bottom line here is that anything you're confused about, any curiosity you have, can be addressed simply by pointing at the subject of your curiosity. There are really 2 major options you're faced with when you're creating a brand new character, and that is simply your race and your class. There are, I think, 13, maybe 13 to 16. I don't know. I don't feel like counting them. There's a bunch of 13-ish races in the game, and about 32 classes, I think, roughly. And the combination of race and class is what determines your primary attributes, your skills, and all this stuff over here. You'll note if you point at the race and the class, it actually gives you some anecdotal information about that race and class. But as I said, that's anecdotal. The more hard data is this stuff. That's what you want to be keeping your eyes on. Now there is the way you, incidentally, if you didn't notice that, the way you cycle through different races is just click on these arrows. If you hold down the button, it'll go really fast. Generally, I just do it one at a time. There is a random option. And to be honest, that's usually the way I play. I'll just select random, and see what race and class I end up with. That way I get an even more unique adventure, and it keeps me on my toes. But I was trying to do one of these Let's Play videos earlier. I had to redo it. I'm redoing it right now, as a matter of fact, because the sound was really too low. And what it generated for me randomly was this gnomish necromancer. And I realized as I was going through the description of what it is we're doing, that it's actually a pretty good example that gives me a lot to talk about. So I'm going to select that, and that's what we're going to use. Now the first thing you want to look at when you're creating a brand new character and you're making your selection is the primary attributes. These are numeric values associated with 4 specific statistics: your strength, your dexterity, your intelligence, and your health. These are the primary things that define your character. These numbers will actually go up, hopefully, a lot as you play, if you survive long enough. They can go down as well, but generally there's going to be an upward trend in them, and if there's not, you're probably not going to last long. But every character starts out with different primary attributes. If you look and see, if I change my race, I change my class, these numbers over here change. They're all basically balanced, though. They all add up to, I think they all add up to 120. I don't remember if that's how it works, but they're all balanced. I think that is how it works. You'll see, though, that they're color-coded. These numbers here, for instance, are black. An average starting number for any of these attributes is 30. And if it's black, that means it's an average number to start. If it's red, it means it's below average to start. If it's green, it means it's above average. So we can see that our gnomish necromancer has average dexterity and health, but he's a little weaker than most starting out characters, and a little smarter than most starting out characters. I'm going to quickly walk through what these stats do as well for you, so you have at least a rough idea of what's going on. I'll just give you the major points, not the finer points about them. Again, if you point at them, you'll see right here, you get some information, so you can read up on it on your own if you're playing later. Strength. Basically what strength does for you is it does a number of things, but there's a few key ones. Like in almost any role-playing game, strength helps to adjust the damage you do to monsters. The stronger you are, it makes sense, the more powerful a blow you can deliver to an orc's head, for instance. So raising your strength can be a way to generate bonus damage when you're fighting with melee weapons. It won't work with missile weapons. That's the drawback to using missile weapons. On the other hand, missile weapons can hit from a distance, so that's the plus. But yeah, bonus strength. The higher your strength is, the more likely you are to do bonus damage, and the more bonus damage you'll do when you do it. Another key feature of strength, and something that I don't think I've ever seen in any other role-playing game, and it's really just a gaming device that was inserted for gameplay reasons, is strength dictates how much gold you can carry, and it's a directly proportional relationship. If you have 20 strength, you can carry a maximum of 20 gold pieces. If you pick up 21 gold pieces, that extra 1 gold piece you found is just gone. It falls down on the floor and disappears through a crack or something. So raising your strength can be a way to make sure that you can carry more treasure, and since treasure is one of the gateways to more experience, which can help you to level up faster, raising your strength can be good for that reason. Another key feature of strength is partially it dictates what weapons and armor you can use. Again, only with melee weapons, not missile weapons, but with melee weapons and armor, all of those things have a minimum strength rating associated with them. So while you can start off maybe using a knife or something, unless you get your strength up, you're not going to be able to pick up that heavy claymore you just found or that giant warhammer. You need to raise your strength before you can actually even use it. Dexterity. Its primary function is to dictate how easily you hit monsters. It's almost a straight-up percentage, at least to start. Assuming you have no bonuses and the monster has no defense rating or no penalties to let you hit it, you can look at your dexterity as a % chance to hit. So at least to start the game, our Gnomish Necromancer, on average, is going to have a 30% chance to hit monsters. There are a lot of finer points that come into play, and we'll get to that when we get to the video about actual combat. But for now, just know that it's a rough indication of how often you're going to hit. He's going to hit about 1/3 of the time, this guy, until he gets his dexterity up, or until he starts meeting monsters with higher defense ratings, then he'll start hitting less. Dexterity also associates with what level of missile weapons you can use. Just like the melee weapons and armor had a minimum strength rating, missile weapons have a minimum dexterity rating. So unless you get your dexterity up, you're going to be stuck using things like slings and darts, not heavy crossbows. There are a few other aspects of strength and dexterity that we will definitely have to cover shortly, but for now let's move on to intelligence. Intelligence's primary influence is on your spell points, how many spell points you have. Spell points dictate, how powerful spells you can cast and how many, how often. Your intelligence is not the sole responsibility there. Intelligence coupled with a skill called thaumaturgy and coupled with the dungeon depth. As you get closer and closer to Xaskazien, you just start getting more and more spell points because he's the source of the magic. But yeah, your intelligence is going to dictate how many spell points you have and what kind of spells you can use. It also, as I said, it also links to which spells you can use. In the same way that missile weapons have a minimum dexterity rating, spells have a minimum intelligence rating. And if you're not smart enough, you just can't cast a spell, whether you know it or not. Lastly, we come down to health. A very key stat, because like in most games, these are your hit points, really. You have your health and your max health. Your health, every time you take damage from a monster, from a trap, it's going to drop. And when it hits 0, your game is over. You lose, your save game gets erased, and you're back to square one. Literally, actually. Your max health, on the other hand, starts equal to your health. It doesn't adjust as you play unless you happen to raise your health score when you level up or something. But the reason there's a discrepancy between max health and health is while your health drops when you take wounds, your max health doesn't, and your health cannot raise above your max health. There's one other really key thing that all of these attributes do, and that is that they allow you access to skills, and I want to cover that really quickly before we move on to what those skills are. There are 4 major types of skills. There are warrior skills, rogue skills, mage skills, and general skills. And you have minimum stat ratings, minimum attribute ratings in each of these categories to give you access to those skills. Strength ties into warrior skills. If you want to learn more warrior skills, you got to get your strength up. Dexterity ties into rogue skills, intelligence ties into mage skills, and health ties into general skills. In every case, trying to learn skills, you need at least a score of 30 in that given attribute to learn the basic level of skills in that category. You need at least 60 to learn advanced skills in that category, and at least 90 to learn expert skills. Now, what are skills? Skills are things your character has learned to do that maybe other characters haven't. And in every case, raising a skill is a good thing. Most of your skills are going to start out in the untrained level. Untrained usually just means it has no effect on the game until you get it to at least the basic level. From basic, you can progress to advanced. From advanced, you can progress to expert. You can't get above expert. Every character, no matter who it is, starts out with a few simple skills that aren't even listed here. Everybody starts out with basic weapon use, basic armor use, basic spell use, and basic thaumaturgy. These are just the minimum things you need to do some simple things in the game, so you've all got them. But depending on what race and class you've chosen, you're going to get different skills over here. In this case, if you point at them, obviously you'll find out what they do, but let's take a look at what our Gnomish Necromancer is going to have, because it'll affect how we play the game in a moment. Advanced gem cutting. If you look up at the center there, right over here, you'll see that with advanced gem cutting, it doubles the value of any gems that this character finds. Gems are just like gold. They do the exact same thing as gold. The difference is, I mentioned earlier, you can't carry more gold pieces than your strength. Gems you can carry an infinite amount, so this guy can only carry 20 gold pieces, but in theory he could carry, if he for some reason found it, 20,000 gold worth of gems. But anytime he finds gems, they're going to be worth extra, so that's, thumbs up to him. Basic entomology. If you look up here, it says basic entomology gives you plus 30 to hit versus insectoids. Now, what the hell is an insectoid? There are 9 overarching classes of monsters, and I'm not going to label them all right now. But in general, it just means the overall type of monster it is. Insectoids are bugs, giant spiders, giant flies, giant worms. Anything buggy is going to be an insectoid. So whenever he's fighting them, he gets plus 30 to hit, which essentially means his dexterity acts as if it was 30 higher. So when he's fighting insects, he's got essentially dexterity 60. Basic necromancy gives him the exact same effect, but for undead. So when he's fighting any skeletons, zombies, vampires, its dexterity is functioning as if it's 60. If you'll note, with basic and entomology and basic necromancy, if you take a look up here, you'll see that the advanced levels and the expert levels give you totally different effects. It's not necessarily just that, at advanced level now he has plus 60 to hit versus insectoids. In this case, advanced entomology, if he got there, he doesn't have that yet, would grant him a 10% chance to find a random potion every time he kills an insectoid. So it's just, you got to check out every skill and see what they do, because at different levels they have different effects. And finally we have basic wand lore. Basic wand lore gives a 25% chance that spells fail when he tries to use a wand, staff, or rod. Now what that means is you can find wands, staves, and rods in the game, and any character can use these things. You can pick them up off the floor and wave them around and try to make them do magical stuff. But if you're not trained at it, waving around a wand and yelling Alahamara ain't going to do much. So it's raising your wand lore skill determines how often the spell actually produces. If you have untrained wand lore skill and you try to use a wand, there's only a 50-50 chance that it has any effect. The rest of the time, the spell just shoots off and it uses up part of the magic power in the wand and nothing happens. But because he's got basic wand lore, 75% of the time when he waves a wand around, he's going to be fine. I got to check those stats in game. That could actually be a typo on this screen, but I'll look at it again in a minute. In case those numbers are off. Those numbers might be off. They seem like they are to me, but we'll look at it in a minute. The next thing we want to look at is unique abilities. Now, unlike skills, which will be, they'll change throughout the game, unlike your stats, which change throughout the game, unique abilities are set at the beginning of the game, and they stay set for the whole game. They are based, again, purely on your race and class combo. This is the unique ability gained because he's a gnome. This is the one gained because he's a necromancer. Unless your race or class changes, these aren't going to fluctuate in any way during the game. In this particular case, his ability is, there's a plus 20% chance that any found weapons or armor have enchantments. Now what that means is you're going to be finding weapons and armor as you walk around. A lot of them are just, a standard sword, but some of them might be magical. There's an extra 20% chance for gnomes that when they find something, it's magical. The necromancer has plus 20 or plus 200 defense versus undead. That is subtracted from the monster's chance to hit you. So it really means that most undead monsters are going to have a really, really tough time hitting this character. He can be relatively fearless around undead, unless it's a really powerful undead monster that could kill him in one swing, because most of the time when they swing, they're just not going to hit him. We also have abilities and deficiencies. The difference between abilities and unique abilities, again, they do apply for the whole game. They stay set unless your race or class somehow changes, which is really, really rare. But the difference is that multiple different races and class combos might have the same abilities as opposed to the unique abilities. In this particular case, it tells you mage skills cost 1 point, general skills cost 1 point. Now what that means is as you play through the game and you level up, you're going to get something called skill points. Skill points are what you spend to raise your skill levels from basic to advanced, advanced to expert, or from untrained to basic. But as I said, there are 4 different classes of skills. So mage skills are only going to take this guy 1 skill point to raise up a level. General skills, which are the ones tied to health, are going to take only 1 skill point. But if you look over here, you'll see that rogue skills cost this guy 2 skill points, and warrior skills cost this guy 3 skill points. So it's really not going to be, those are not areas this character is going to be wisely concentrating on. If he does, he's going to advance really, really slowly. Deficiencies, like abilities, they start off this way and they stay this way for the whole game. In this particular case, our gnomish necromancer can never gain expert warrior skills. So although he can train warrior skills to the basic level, he can even train them to the advanced level, in both cases at great cost. He can't train them to the expert level. Those are denied him for the whole game. Likewise, there's this specific skill restriction which says he can never gain advanced weapon use. Advanced weapon use, well, weapon use is a skill, a warrior skill. And as I said, every character starts with basic weapon use. But this character can't progress beyond that. Now, weapons come in 3 different levels of power. There is light weapons, medium weapons, and heavy weapons. You need advanced weapon use to even have access to medium weapons. You need expert to have access to heavy. So this particular character is going to be stuck using light weapons for the entire duration of the game. One thing that means as well is that he's going to have to keep an eye on whatever weapons he finds, making sure that they stay in relatively good shape, because as you get lower and lower in the dungeon, you start finding heavier and heavier weapons. So if he loses all of his early light weapons, by the middle of the game he's going to have trouble finding any more. So it's important he keeps at least 1 or 2 in good shape. The last thing we see here is he has racial hatred for animals. Animals is another one of those classes of the 9 classes of monsters. I mentioned insectoids are the bugs. Animals are animals, bears, wolves, that sort of thing, dogs. Those type of monsters rather start off the game absolutely hating our gnomish necromancer. Now, every one of those 9 different classes of monsters has an attitude towards your character. Most of them start off indifferent. They really don't give a crap about you one way or the other. You're a source of food, but nothing more than that. But as you kill more and more of them, especially if you kill important members of their race, you kill their leaders, you kill their champions, their heroes, they get more and more angry at you, and it progresses to the point where they dislike you, eventually they hate you, and even beyond that, you can become their sworn enemy. And as that happens, they get more and more bonuses against you. At hatred, I think they get like plus 20 to hit. Here's another typo up there. If you look up there, it says you get plus 10 to hit. I gotta fix that. They get plus 20 to hit you when they hate you. And at sworn enemy, I think they also do an extra 50% damage. The last thing that was affected by our choice of racing class was simply our icon. This little graphic, as you see, changes depending on what you're playing. So when you've got your character all set, as we do now, if you picked it back, you'd go back to the main menu, but we're not going to do that. We're going to click OK. And then you get a chance to type in the name for your character. I don't know why, but for some reason I always name gnomish characters with a Scottish name. It's just a habit. Name it whatever you want to. Let's call this guy York McGarren. We're going to press enter, and when we do that, it's going to take us to the dungeon. So let's do that. As you can see here, it says journeying to caverns. Please wait. You just got to wait it out. That's it loading in its graphics, etc. At the bottom of the game, the screen, you'll see a bunch of did you know, some information about the game in case there's something you didn't know. Now when I press any key, we'll start playing the game. So I'm going to call it quits here and then start a new video for the actual gameplay. See you again in a moment.